So today I want to look at a problem that I see in culture that is becoming a bit of a crisis. And then I want to suggest one possible solution to the problem that we as Christians, as creatives, might be able to offer to deal with the problem. So the problem that I want to address today is that we're facing a bit of a crisis of epistemology. Now you might wonder, what does that mean? Epistemology is kind of a big word. Essentially, epistemology is the theory of knowledge. It's how we know things, how we distinguish fact from fiction, true things from false things. And I think we're going through a bit of a crisis of that in our culture today with so much information, so much content. How do we know what's true? How do we know what's trustworthy? So I want to unpack a few angles to this crisis of epistemology. Some of you might have seen that last year the Oxford English Dictionary named the word of the year post-truth. The international word of the year for 2016 was post-truth. They define it this way: post-truth is relating to or denoting circumstances in which objective facts are less influential in shaping public opinion than appeals to emotion and personal belief. But post-truth, this idea of the erosion of truth, isn't a new thing. It's been going on for a long time. About a decade ago, you might remember Stephen Colbert coined the term truthiness, which is defined by Urban Dictionary as the quality of stating concepts one wishes or believes to be true rather than the facts. So post-truth, truthiness, it's been around for a long time, but I would say it goes back even further than that. Earlier this year, Time magazine on its cover had this provocative three-word question: is truth dead? And they designed this cover in such a way to mirror a cover that they had on Time magazine 50 years earlier, 1967, which was, is God dead? So Time magazine was intentionally drawing this parallel for a reason, because there's a philosophical correlation here. Once you get rid of God as the source of objective truth, as the standard by which we measure truth, once we get rid of God, of course, the erosion of truth is going to follow. The death of truth will follow. So this is part of why we're in an epistemological crisis, right? The objective standard of truth is gone, and now truth is just what each of us makes of it. It's a subjective thing. So that's one aspect of our epistemological crisis. Another aspect I want to look at is the whole fake news phenomenon. So this phrase, fake news, hashtag fake news, has become popularized by our president, Donald Trump, who likes to take to Twitter to accuse any news he doesn't like of being fake. CNN, New York Times, Washington Post, he delegitimizes them by calling them fake news. But I would suggest that this isn't a new thing either. This has been something that's been going on for many years, and what Trump is doing is just tapping into and using to his advantage a deep distrust of the mainstream media that has been around for a long time. Gallup research has shown that Americans' trust and confidence in the mass media to report the news accurately and objectively has been on a downward trend for more than a decade. Pew Research just this summer came out with a statistic that said 63% of Americans say that the national news media has a negative effect on the way things are going in this country. But interestingly, that's actually dropped a few points from 2 years ago. In 2015, it was even higher, 65%. So it's not like Trump is making it worse. He's just tapping into this existing problem of big distrust, skepticism on the part of Americans towards the news. So what's behind this? Why are we so skeptical of the news? Why don't we trust it like we used to? I would suggest that a big reason is what I call infotainment. So what is infotainment? It's essentially this fusion, this morphing together of news and entertainment. And it's come about over the last 2 or 3 decades, basically with the rise of 24-hour cable news and the explosion of web-based media, which means there's huge competition for people's attention. There's only a limited number of eyeballs that can look at your news. There's only a limited number of people that can click on your stories, so everyone's fighting for those eyeballs and clicks. And what happens is the news is selling things to us that are breaking news that aren't breaking news. They're manufacturing news where there really isn't news. The fact is there isn't enough news going on in the world on any given day to warrant filling the constant airtime that needs to be filled on these channels and on these websites. So what you end up having is a lot of filler, a lot of commentary, a lot of debate, and kind of this elevation of trivia to the level of important breaking news. But when everything becomes important, nothing is. It's this kind of boy who cried wolf effect. And I think that's leading us to be skeptical. What do we pay attention to? How do we know what's really news, what isn't? So I would summarize the problem of the crisis of epistemology in this way. There's more information than ever, but less and less wisdom. And there's more stimulation than ever in our world, but less and less transformation. And there's more diversion than ever, but less and less joy. So what do we do about this? As Christians, this is a problem, right? The erosion of truth, the erosion of joy and transformation in our society is a problem. How can we find true joy and true transformation and true wisdom in a world like this? Well, I don't know if you guys remember these, the old food pyramids that you learned about in health class in grade school. Essentially, the idea of the food pyramid was to help us learn the right proportions of food groups. Different nutritions are better than others. So at the bottom level of the food pyramid are the more important food groups for our health. And as you go up to the top, you're supposed to eat those groups less. So the sweets category is at the top. You're supposed to use that sparingly. So I would suggest that we need to have a different, healthier habits of knowledge intake. I think that's a crucial thing for us. So what I want to propose today is a variation on this pyramid. I'm calling it the wisdom pyramid. And this is my attempt at what I think a healthy, balanced diet of knowledge might look like. So I'm just going to spend the next part of my talk just going through each level of this from the bottom up. Okay, so for Christians, obviously the most important source of wisdom is the Bible, right? This should be our daily bread, just like the bread group used to be, I think, the most important baseline of food. I don't think it is anymore, but the Bible is our daily bread. It's the divine speech act of God. It's God himself speaking to us. So of course, it's the most important source of wisdom. The Bible is the creator of the universe, revealing himself to us. It's a book about God. So if Proverbs 9 is correct, that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom and the knowledge of the Holy One is insight, then reading about God in his autobiography is key to our wisdom. So we have to build our knowledge diet around the Bible. Recently, I told my wife to not let me look at my phone in the morning for the first hour of the day. And I know that's super hard, right? We tend to wake up, and what's the first thing we do? We reach for our phones, we check social media. So the last month or so, I've not looked at my phone for the first hour of the day, and instead I've sat in my reading chair and read the Bible and prayed, and it's been transformative for me. I've sensed myself being more joyful at the beginning of my day. So I would suggest that to you as a way to start your knowledge day right with wisdom. Okay, so the next level up is the church. I want to talk about two aspects of the church, the local church and church tradition. So the local church, it's so important for our sanity in today's world to be grounded in physical, regular community. And this is what the local church provides us. The local church provides us with access to wise people who can know us, who we can be known by, who can have conversations with us and mirror back to us things we need to recognize in ourselves. And then there's the embodied rhythms of the church. So the daily or the weekly rhythms of going together, singing, praying, worshiping, taking communion together. We pick things up in those movements, in those liturgies that almost on a subconscious level give us wisdom. So I would argue that in the act of the Lord's Supper, for example, taking the bread and the wine or the juice every week, there's more truth in that than all the articles that you might have read in the week before. Okay, so now church tradition. The other aspect of church that's important for our wisdom is the people who have come before us in Christian history. There's so much time-tested wisdom and theology that can be a reassurance for us in this fake news world. We're not reinventing the wheel. So there are church practices and church beliefs that have been practiced and believed for thousands of years. And we need to surround ourselves with this. We need to treasure this. We need to listen to the voices of the past, the wise people in Christian history who have come before. We need to cling to this historical continuity and focus on what are the areas of continuity with Christians throughout history. That is a major source of wisdom in today's frenetic world. Okay, so moving up to the next category, nature and beauty. Some of you might be like, what does that mean? Nature and beauty is wisdom. I think it's so important for us to gain wisdom by attuning ourselves to the rhythms of nature and beauty. The natural world does not lie. There's this great headline in the LA Times recently that said, we may live in a post-truth era, but nature does not. And there's such wisdom in that, right? Nature is what it is. We might have opinions about whether it's raining outside, but it either is or isn't raining, right? There's an objective reality, an objective truth to nature that's important. It grounds us. when so much is uncertain in our world, like there's a certainty to nature. And not only that, but God reveals himself to us in nature, general revelation. The heavens declare the glories of God. The skies proclaim his handiwork. So are we getting outside regularly and listening? What do the heavens declare? What is nature speaking to us about God? I think it's so important. And nature also cultivates gratitude for the givenness of things, gratitude for the rhythms of our own bodies that God has created, Sabbath, rest, things like that. And I think beauty functions in a similar way. Beauty helps us to slow down. It helps us to be attentive, attuned to the wonderful works of God's creation and human creation, culture. It helps us to be reflective and grateful and just to enjoy, just to sit in front of something beautiful and to observe and pay attention. There's so much wisdom that we glean in doing that. You know, beauty by definition is unnecessary. It's superfluous. And so in a world that's very utilitarian, this has a way of helping us understand grace, for example, which is superfluous. We can understand the superfluous beauty of grace and God in a way through beauty that we can't understand it in books and other intellectual ways. So beauty teaches us things in a powerful way. But books are also an important source of wisdom. So I would say this about books: read them. Like, read as many as you can. Read old books more than you do new books. Read the great books. Read a broad array of books: fiction, nonfiction, poetry, prose. You know, not only the content of books gives us wisdom, but just the habits that it cultivates in us by reading books. Just helping us to be patient, to be disciplined, to be able to wrestle with an idea over a long period of time. Like, we could spend 10 weeks reading the same book, and we're going to be so much wiser for that than reading like 100 short articles that take 2 minutes to read. So read books, read them more often than you wander around the internet. Which brings me to the internet. The internet is not the worst. It's not at the top. It's not in the dreaded fats, oils, and sweets category of the wisdom pyramid, but it's almost there. I mean, the internet, we can't do without it, right? We can't live without the internet. And there's plenty of good things about it. There's plenty of resources that we can benefit from on the internet. But I would say this about the internet: don't go to it just to kind of meander and surf it without any purpose. Like, go to the internet with something specific in mind that you want to research, that you want to learn about. It can be great for that. And also focus on the sources and the websites that wise people in your life recommend. So listen to the wise voices, not just the random person on Twitter. And, you know, clicking on things from random people on social media can lead to this spiral of nothingness that is bad for our spiritual and mental health, which leads to social media. So social media, what can I say? It's at the top of the wisdom pyramid, the fats, oils, and sweets category. Use it sparingly. You know, part of the crisis of epistemology, I think, that we're facing has to do with the fact that we've flipped this. We've put social media more on the foundational level of our knowledge intake diet. We look at social media first thing in the morning, we look at it the last thing before we go to bed, and many, many times during the day. That's not good for our spiritual health. That's not good for our joy. There's been articles recently with all this data about how social media is contributing to a mental health crisis, and certainly that's true of spiritual health as well. So I'll leave you with this observation about the wisdom pyramid. If you notice it, going from the bottom to the top, it goes from the more enduring things. So the Bible is the eternal God, his speech act to us, and the church will outlive all things in creation. It goes from the more enduring things to the least enduring, the more fleeting things. Social media is changing every second of the day. So I would leave you just with this thought. When it comes to having a solution to our crisis of epistemology, we should orient our knowledge diet more around enduring things than fleeting things. I think that's going to be the source of joy for us, the source of life and wisdom and transformation, when we cling to the enduring things and spend less time on the fleeting things like social media and all the things that could distract us. Thank you.